Hey everyone, we are live here with Colm Tuite.
Hey guys, happy St. Patrick's Day.
Happy St. Patrick's Day. I guess that's particularly relevant because Colm grew up in Dublin, Ireland, and he still lives there and works as a freelance designer there. Colm's built a startup and it was acquired a couple years ago by a company called Marvel App that works with design prototyping tools. And he's joining us now from Dublin, where he has not had too much to drink yet, he told me.
That's what you think.
Well, you're very good at carrying on a conversation then.
No, I'm pretty sober right
Awesome.
now, unfortunately.
Well, thank you for your sacrifice. So our live audience thanks you for your coherence. Colm, tell us a little bit about your background. My understanding is you, as a high schooler, you basically dropped out and you just focused on pursuing music. And then after pursuing music for a while, you transitioned into doing design work. Can you tell us a little bit about that entire era of your life?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I didn't really drop out of high school, but I mean, I just in my last 2 years, I guess I didn't attend many classes. I guess you could put it that way. So yeah, I was just like really big into music. I wasn't really getting much out of high school. Wasn't into many of the topics that we were studying. And I had a film and TV publishing deal with a company in LA called Editor's Choice Music. So I was just like, staying home, trying to learn instruments, studying music theory, and just really big into that whole world. And my high school didn't offer music, so it was just like inaccessible there. So yeah, when I spent like 6 years just studying music nonstop and trying to make it in that whole industry, but like got to a point where I hit a wall. Kind of, it's just like music in the industry is funny. It's really locked down. When you get to a certain point, it's just so hard to like push through and go take it further. You'd really have to like move to LA and like really start building connections and things like that, like going to auditions and stuff. Like, I mean, I guess my ultimate goal was to like become a session musician of some sort, like play guitar, in studios and like, tour with some type of a live act and make money that way. But it's just so competitive. It's so tough. And like, in terms of songwriting and things, like it's really locked down. There's like an inner circle of songwriters that just write all pop music. And it's hard to break in. So yeah, eventually I like kind of, became disheartened with that and wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And my dad had a print company, just a very small print shop in my hometown. It was just him and his business partner. So he just asked me one day, did I want to come down and check it out? So I went down and he gave me one of those old bubble iMacs and just sat me in the dark corner in the back room and just like gave me like some cracked copy of Illustrator and just like just let me at it, and I just fell in love like straight away. Just became completely enamored with the whole world of design. I had no idea what I was doing at all. Wasn't even sure like what the various paper sizes were, like A3 and A2, A1, etc. But yeah, I worked there for like 4 years with them. Just learned everything. Just off the cuff, just like took a flyer or poster and tried to copy it in Illustrator, tried to recreate things, business cards, and just learned everything about the print industry. And then after 4 years or 4.5 years there, I got into web design through what was the program? I was using like a WYSIWYG editor, Freeway. That's what it was called. It was like I don't know if you've heard of it. Yeah, Freeway. It's kind of like it was like Dreamweaver, back in the day. It was like a WYSIWYG editor where you could like drag and drop elements to create a website and then deploy it live. without writing any code at all. So that's how I like transitioned into web design. And then my brother was a programmer at the time. He's 2 years older than me, so he was constantly pushing me to learn HTML and CSS. You know, I'd have in one of my websites that I built with Freeway, I'd have like some issue, and I'd go run to him and ask him how can I fix it, and he'd be like, "Oh, dude, I can't even read this code. It's terrible." You know, you have to learn
Yeah,
how to code properly.
those apps just generated the most garbage code.
Yeah. So I mean, I had no idea what I was handing him, but it was just like, here, try and fix this. So yeah, he was like constantly pressuring me to learn code. And eventually, you know, I just learned some HTML, CSS online, and then left that print shop I was working for and went out on my own freelancing.
Awesome. And your freelancing career ultimately transitioned into you building a product.
Yeah, well, many products. I built like 5 or 6 or more probably startups. Yeah, with my brother, most of them with my brother. Yeah, we had no idea. Like, this is going back 7, 8 years ago. You know, we were just like, one of them, we tried to build an app for like a rental app, you know, for renting or for buying houses. And we were just using Rails. You know, my brother was a Rails programmer, and you know, we just tried to get that going. Tried to get something going for the print shop that I was working at. It was like Trello, but just for the print industry. Yeah, tried a bunch of things, and they all just failed miserably. And then just, yeah, one day, I mean, I was freelancing there then for a few years. You know, just various clients, and building startups on the side. And yeah, I started Plexi, which was a design tool, which was like a web-based design tool. So it's kind of like Sketch, but like, you know, in no way as like much more simpler. You know, much more simpler than Sketch. And it was in the browser, and I tried to focus on animation, like interaction-based design. So
Right.
yeah, I mean, I built the first version of that on my own with my extremely limited JavaScript skills, and just like put a really, really rough prototype on Designer News, and it did well. Like, you know, a lot of people took interest, and a lot of people emailed me about it and encouraged me to keep working on it. So yeah, I kept working on that for like 2 years. I hired a guy called Elliot in New York. He was about 18 at the time. It really amazed me, like how he had a really high reputation on Stack Overflow for like answering JavaScript programming questions. That's how I found him. He was just like a genius, you know. It's just everything. I would just give him like a bunch of tasks in Trello that I couldn't do, and like, you know, the next week he would just have them all done completely, you know, perfect. Like, so
Wow.
so the two of us spent like a year and a half or 2 years working on Plexi, and getting it to a point where we could release it. And then I released it, and it just kind of went dead, you know. So that was kind of disheartening. But I mean, we spent like 6 months, or like, I mean, I wasn't working with Elliot then after that, but on my own, I spent like 6 months trying to like improve it and continuing to develop it, and like talking with some customers who are still using it. But yeah, overall, it was just like really hard to get traction and you know, retain users, because like that whole industry is so competitive. You know, there are so many prototyping tools coming out every other day. Then eventually, just out of the blue, Morat from Marvel App reached out to me and said that they were thinking about building a similar tool, but like rather than start from scratch, that they would just acquire Plexi and bring us on board. So that was really cool. So that's what happened then.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about the acquisition process. I would imagine a lot of the developers and designers who are watching this haven't actually been acquired. Like that's like very few startups are acquired. It's probably like maybe 2% or something of them actually make it to that level. So what was that process like of having your product integrated into Marvel App and joining the Marvel App team?
Yeah, I mean that was really cool. The whole thing was completely new to me because I guess like the best part about it was that it was validation. You know, it was like because right up until that point, I had no idea what I was. You know, I had no idea if I was on the right track or if I wasn't. And you know, I guess I was just like everyone else, just like just working away, slugging away, and trying to learn new skills, and not really seeing anything come of it. You know, unless of course if you're working for a job. But then when my startup got acquired, it was like, wow, maybe I am doing something right, you know. And so yeah, that was cool. The guys at Marvel acquired the startup and then brought me and Elliot on board, the guy that I was working with in New York. So the two of us joined the team at Marvel, and you know, spent about a year and a half there integrating Plexi into their platform, which is now called Canvas, Marvel Canvas. I mean, it's been since then it's been rebuilt from the ground up in Canvas, in like HTML5 Canvas, with the guys on board, and rebuilt in React. So yeah, I mean that was cool.
Awesome. So they took your prototype, or I guess your fully functioning app, and used it as kind of a prototype for the full refactor to React app and HTML.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. I mean, initially it was released as a beta, and I mean, it was kind of like as a test initially, I guess, the first launch to see would people be interested in this. It was because the way Marvel app works is that you upload images, like you design your screens in Sketch or Photoshop, and then upload images, and then you can piece them together using Marvel App's platform. So Marvel Canvas was like the first step toward having an in-house, like a built-in way that you can draw your own images now. So I mean, the guys are still developing that, and I believe that they're pretty close to their first release.
Awesome. We can definitely look for that in the future. So you went from, just to recap, you went from a high school student who was primarily focused on learning music theory, composition. You did that for a number of years. Then you did graphic design, I guess, working with print and learning that aspect of design. And then you transitioned into web design. You learned to code. And then you built a product. You built many products, but one of them was acquired, and you worked on that for 2 years. And now you're working as a freelancer. And you wrote an amazing, extremely popular Medium article recently about the notion of design systems. And I've linked to it below. For anybody who hasn't read this article, you should absolutely check out Colm's article. But can you describe what a design system is real quick, and perhaps contrast it to a design framework, for example, a CSS framework?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've been going back and forth on like various definitions. I'm not really sure myself what the best way to describe it, but in my article I said a design system is an evolving set of rules governing the composition of a product. So it's basically everything from your palettes, you know, like your color palettes, you know, shadows, all of the values that you apply to the properties that make up, you know, the styles that make your company look like your company and not like other companies. You know, coupled with the components that you have, like buttons and inputs, which would be your UI toolkit, I guess. Coupled with like you know, larger components, and then like screen compositions, plus like code guidelines, you know, naming conventions for files and for like code, I guess. Plus like rules, like for like when to use this button, when to use that input, when to use this heading, and when not to use this font size. You know, rules that govern how your developers and designers should compose screens, you know, using your code base and using your design. And that applies like across platform, you know, not just on web, not just on mobile, but like, you know, on your entire suite of products. So yeah, I mean, that's what I mean, at least when I say design system.
So really the design system is like the central document that governs all the other design documents. It's like the master design document.
Yeah, I guess you put it that way.
Yeah. And do you know of any organizations that have this kind of like master plan for design that they've actually taken it to that level where they're kind of doing full systems design thinking?
I mean, honestly, it's very, very rare. I mean, I mentioned in my article that design systems are becoming much more popular, which is great to see. I mean, there are tons and tons of articles about design systems. There are like tons of people linking to books and resources about design systems. Lots of companies are posting job listings, like, and setting up teams specifically for design system roles. But in terms of like seeing products that are, you know, rolled out with like completely integrated design systems that are up to date, it's very rare you can see them. I guess like best examples would be Google's material design, which is like a super comprehensive design system guidelines. And another great example would be Airbnb, who they do tons and tons of work on design systems and design system tooling. I believe they've got an in-house team specifically for design systems. So, I mean, yeah, that's another good company. Another company would be Intercom, who are, as far as I'm aware, they're just setting up a design systems team, but they really, I chatted with some of the guys at Intercom, and I mean, they really seem to understand the importance of design systems and like how, I mean, they really like how, you know, how important it is to approach design in a systemic way, you know, rather than just like sporadically. But like things like like toolkits like Foundation or Bootstrap, you know, even though they have like Bootstrap has like comprehensive documents on how to work with the Bootstrap toolkit, but you know, it's not coded or designed in a really systematic way. Like, for example, take the button component. Like it displays the button component, it shows you what it should look like, and it shows you how to use it in the code, but it doesn't go as far as to say like, how should this button look on a dark background, or, you know, on a blue background. It doesn't take into account the actual pragmatic uses of a design system. You know, when you actually go to build a website, you know, almost 100% of websites will have some alternate background color, and each of your components should be able to function on that background color, you know, if they are supposed to. You know, some components should never be used on a certain background color. And if you look at various websites, like I don't want to be knocking anyone's work, but like I'm just thinking
FreeCodeCamp if you want. Like I'm always open to constructive.
No, I'm just thinking of GitHub, because Mark Otto works at GitHub and he built Bootstrap, but they recently rolled out a new header, a new nav, like a dark nav, and I was looking at CSS, and it's like they've styled the input like specific to the dark header. So it's like elsewhere in the code base they've said, here's what our input looks like, but in this specific location we're going to hack it to make it look some differently, because it's on a different color background, and we didn't think about that earlier on when we were designing our design system. So I think like that's, for me, that's like the essence of design systems thinking. Like everything you do, stop for a second before you do it and think, where exactly will this component be used, and how will it be used, and like, and what are it's not going to be used in just one way. You know, we need to consider all the different ways that this component is going to be used.
Yeah, so in many ways it's just an extension of design thinking and systems engineering kind of concepts, the notion that you should slow down and think in a whole systems way whenever you're making a change, so that you don't end up with a whole lot of bolted on functionality and a lot of one-off stuff.
Yeah. And like, I mean, the thinking is, when you're doing a one-off change, the thinking is, oh, it's just a one-off. But like, if you look at 90% of code bases, they're just made up of tons of one-off changes.
Yeah, there's always that joke about like, this is temporary or something like that. Like, and then you look at the commit history and it's from like years ago.
Yeah.
Always treat any code changes as though they're gonna live on forever.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at like Microsoft, so I'll talk in terms of code because that's what I know. But if you look at like Microsoft Windows, for example, the reason the code base gets huge, bigger and bigger, and every release is like an extra gigabyte or two, is because they're worried about breaking stuff and changing stuff. So instead, it just creeps. And for example, a function that would normally take like 2 parameters has these other 20 parameters. Nobody's brave enough to remove them.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you see that all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, and CSS, I guess. Let's step back and talk a little bit about how you research these things, because it sounds like you spend a lot of time just going and looking at websites and inspect element and digging into the CSS.
It sounds sad, but that's most of my life.
So do you think that that's an extension of your kind of self-taught ethos? You learn music on your own, you learn design on your own without formal training, certainly not formal academic training. Do you think that's just kind of a reflection of how you learn?
I definitely think so. I think so because I'm not sure if I gravitated towards those industries or those types of jobs because of some innate personality trait I have, or because I gained this innate personality trait from working in like so many of these types of jobs. I'm not sure which way it went, but certainly there are tons of parallels, for example, between like the work I did in music and the work I do now in design. Like, for example, like distilling down a song like into tiny little snippets of music, and then like storing them so I can refactor them until they're perfect. Nothing's ever perfect, but until I'm happy with them, and then like reusing them throughout the song. And it's the exact same with code, like distilling down a UI into tiny little reusable components, and even further down into tiny little reusable styles, and refactoring those until they're perfect, and then reusing them throughout the whole UI. But yeah, sorry, what was the question? I just got lost.
Oh, we were just kind of riffing on the nature of, is it a reflection of the way you learn? Kind of this ad hoc, like, let's
I mean, I guess
artifact in the real world and
I mean, that is how I learned initially. I just like, even in print, that's how I learned. I would just take a poster and I would just try and copy the poster. But like when I was learning web design, I remember like going to Facebook and trying to copy their blue header nav, and I would just inspect the element for ages, like, and try and copy the color, and then try and rebuild it myself without having Facebook open. So yeah, I mean, that's like a huge part of how I learned, just like drilling away at something until it was perfect. And I mean, I guess that's why I went so deep into design systems, because constantly when I was building websites, I would just constantly run into this problem where I designed my input component, for example, and like thought it was perfect. And then when I actually went to build a number of different screens with that UI component, I would always have to tweak it and change it and like hack it into place, like to make, some margin fit, or resize it for a sidebar, or, change the background color to put it into a header nav, and I just got to wondering, like, am I doing something wrong here? Or like, is this what like all websites do? And it turns out that is how most websites handle it. They just hack it into place. But I just always thought like there was something I was missing. And I finally realized, like, I mean, I was just doing half the work all the time. I was just doing half the work, and then like neglecting the other half of the work. And all my components were like only built 50%. They were just built for a white background, and that was it. And I had no actual, I wasn't baking in any understanding of how these components will be used in the real world. I was just coding them for like, so they looked good on Dribble or something, So, I mean, definitely.
Well, I understand that you're working on a new project right now. I think you mentioned that you were working on some sort of CSS framework or tool.
Yeah.
Tell us
it's called Bantam, for better or worse.
What's it called?
Bantam.
Bantam. Okay.
Yeah.
What does Bantam mean? Is that like a noun?
I hate naming things so badly, but it's bantamweight. Like the fight weight divisions.
Ah, that's where I've heard that before.
Featherweight or bantamweight or heavyweight. So it's like I named it bantam because like bantam is a really lightweight division, and at the time, years ago when I started it, I was just trying to like build the smallest set of reusable style classes that I could build, that I could just use to build almost any website. And it weighed like 3 or 4 kilobytes after compression. So I call it bantam.
Wow.
Since then it has evolved into a full-blown toolkit. So it's not so bantam anymore, but I'm not changing the name because I hate naming things.
I mean, that's a good name. It's very. I mean, I didn't know what bantamweight was, but now that you explain it, it seems like an excellent synonym for lightweight. Which it sounds like that was certainly one of the goals, is just performance and not being a heavy tool. Like Bootstrap keeps getting bigger and bigger, for example. A lot of the other popular frameworks are getting bigger and bigger. How do you prevent? So one of the things we've been talking about is the fact that you're doing, like, when you just build the component without thinking of the context it's going to be used in, you're really only doing half of the work. You're always going to be encountering corner cases that you need to update your entire design system to reflect and encompass. How do you keep a tool lightweight when you know that there's going to be that kind of evolutionary trial and error process?
Yeah, so I mean, right now I'm in the midst of building out Bantam. I'm trying to get ready for V1, and what I'm doing is just taking each component one at a time, and I have like a couple of test screens. So I'm building like a really complex email screen, something like Mailbox was, and I've got a marketing screen that I'm building out, and I've got another like statistics-based web app screen that I'm building out. So every time I do some progress on one of the components, I test it out in each of these screens, and I make sure that it fits and it works in each of the different contexts that it's going to be used in eventually. I mean, obviously these 3 screens won't encompass every single use case for all of these components, but I mean, I'm never going to, be able to solve everyone's problems. So, I'm happy with just testing it in those 3 screens. And so it's like, those 3 different screens have different colored backgrounds. They have like sometimes the component is in a sidebar, sometimes it's in a nav, sometimes it's in your main content. Sometimes like an input is coupled with a button, sometimes an input has an icon inside it. There's just so many different variations on each component. And as I'm building out the pages, I'm going back to the components then to like, make sure that all these contexts are baked into the components.
How soon do you think you'll have like a alpha release that people can play with?
I mean, well, people could start playing right now. It's on GitHub, Bantam. I have it on npm, and I have it hosted on S3, so you could start playing around with it right now. But it's I mean, obviously it's heavily in flux. But I'm hoping to have like V1 ready in maybe 3 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that.
Awesome. And so once you have that V1 out, are you going to try to keep the namespacing consistent so that it doesn't so you don't break backward compatibility for future versions, or is that a concern, or are you just going to assume people are going to be?
I mean, I haven't. This would be my first. This is my first open source project that anyone's taken any interest in. I mean, it only has 100 stars on GitHub, but it's like infinitely more than anything else I've ever worked on. So I don't have too much experience working on open source projects. I haven't even contributed to many open source projects, so I'm not entirely sure exactly how it works or what the best practices are. But from what I gather, just from reading some articles on it, I don't think I want to be too concerned with versioning, because it just becomes this nightmare of like dealing with support requests and things like that.
Right.
I think I think like I think after I release the V1, the next step would be to port it to React, and like maybe using CSS modules or style components or something like that. But after that, I guess like the main changes for in each version would just be visual, you know, like updating the components so that they you know, they look modern, you know, so the whole framework doesn't end up looking really dated. You know, aside from that, I can't imagine changing too much, or at least I'm hoping not to have to change too much. I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good problem to have. A whole lot of people are using your product and giving you feedback, for sure. Well, I'm going to recommend that everybody who's watching this read that article again that you wrote about design systems. You should all follow Colm on Twitter and check out his personal website, which I discovered is hosted on Netlify, which is a pretty cool new static page hosting service. And I'm going to also put a link. If you have a link to your GitHub repo, I'll put a link into the notes below as soon as we end the stream. And everybody go check it out. If you think it's cool, give it a star.
Cool.
Well, thank you so much, Colm, for taking time out of your St. Patrick's Day Friday evening.
No problem. Thank you. Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. And I'm looking forward to hearing updates on how Bantam goes. And I'm very excited if you get a chance to write about it, I'd love to read it. And I think our community would love to read about the evolution of this framework as well.
Yeah, I've got some articles planned. If you have some plan to write some new stuff on it after it's released.
All right. Well, thank you again. Have a beautiful weekend. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And keep working on that, man. We're very excited to see it.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Cheers, everyone.